Well, Mike, thank you very much for your insights there in your interview with Maria. We're going to move on to our first live panel discussion of the event. It's under the title of Adapting Your Supply Chain to the Changing Nature of Consumerism. I imagine that's a story that's changed quite a bit over the last year and will continue to do so. Sheri, you're moderating. I will hand over to yourself. Have at them.
Awesome. Thanks, Patty. And a warm hello to everyone live and tuning in on demand. Before we get started, let's get to know each other a little bit. Starting with myself, my name's Sheri Hinish. I am also known as the Supply Chain Queen, an IBM futurist, and a supply and demand chain executive pro to know. I'd like to ask each of the panelists to share your 30-second elevator pitch, starting with Bjorn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. Again, Bjorn Bengtsson. I'm the Chief Supply Chain and Product Officer for UnTuckIt. It's one of the fastest growing e-com companies in the United States, where I have the pleasure of directing the design, the technical design, product development department, and the production supply chain team. So very happy to be here with you, Sheri, and hope to have an interesting and fulfilling discussion with you all.
Thanks, Bjorn. Next up, Jamin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jamin Dick, and I started my career like Sheri. I was at IBM for quite a while. I'm now at Alibaba, and I lead the supply chain team for North America. And I'm very excited to be here with you all and to talk about supply chain with you.
Amazing. Norm, you're up next.
Hey, Norm Burlett with Ryder. I'm Vice President General Manager of the retail and technology sector for Ryder. I have responsibility for a number of high-tech and retail customers. Been with Ryder 22 years, all of it in the supply chain world.
Thank you, Norm. And last up, Roman.
Hi, I'm Roman Soberai, and I'm the head of global shipping at Etsy, which, if you haven't heard of us, we're the two-sided marketplace that focuses on handmade and vintage items. We support about 2.5 million sellers, 87% of which are women, and about 45 million buyers worldwide. So my job is focused on helping our micro entrepreneurs give our buyers the best possible delivery experience.
Thank you, Roman, and thank you, everyone. So let's dive in. In the midst of global crises, supply chain organizations are used to the never normal world of changing customer motivations. Yet right now, this feels different, an inflection point where fulfilling customer expectations really becomes a matter of survival. When we were preparing for this chat, 3 key themes emerged. So let's kick off the discussion around the first theme, transparency. Product and supply chain transparency. So gentlemen, our first question is, how do you strengthen customer trust and loyalty with transparency and also amongst trading partners? And Jamin, we'll start with you.
Great. This is a really important question for all of us. Definitely in the e-commerce world, in the B2B world where I work, this is really important to our customers. So I would say customers have been conditioned to expect more transparency in their private lives when they order things, and that translates into the B2B world when they're running a business. And so over the past decade, that's become normal, and they're making buying decisions based on it. In cross-border, transparency is especially critical since many customers are not aware of all the hidden costs that come up in a cross-border transaction. And so that's the first area. And then the second is about reliable delivery. I recall seeing a study recently where consumers were spending 15 to 20% more on products that they could get elsewhere cheaper, but the delivery dates were clearer, and they felt that they could rely on the delivery promise. So in B2B, this is even more important because unlike a consumer, delivering a day early or late could mean that there's no one at the warehouse to receive it. So transparency is incredibly important, but it's also important to be combined with accuracy for them.
Thank you, Jamin. Roman, would you like to share a bit around transparency?
Sure. I think Jamin really hit the nail on the head. I mean, right now we're in that perfect case study of trust. Buyers have really just come to expect that everything's going to work flawlessly. You turn the knob, hot water comes out, pandemic hits, suddenly supply chains are disrupted, delivery interruptions, product shortages, fundamentals like toilet paper can't be assumed anymore. So buyers really are starting to check those tracking links every day. That's their connection. You didn't know whether or not they were paying attention before. Now they are. They're not just waiting for a text to say it's been delivered. So this is the real test of our logistics transparency, where previously it was a nice to have, maybe when things went wrong. Now it's just assumed that you always know where that product is, and you need to have them working seamlessly. Mm-hmm. So buyers right now, they're checking into the three things. Will you still accept the order if you don't have inventory? That's a breach in trust. Are your delivery times accurate? And are they dynamic? Or you just have static ones that aren't credible? And if not, are you throwing up, well, things are going to be delayed, kind of the general notices, which says you don't really know what's going on. And then finally, are your customers being alerted when something goes wrong? Do you send updates and say, looks like things are going to be delayed a day or two to maintain that trust? So these are things that the customers are going to remember, and it's going to take a while for that complacency to come back, but it's going to take a much longer time for the trust for your brand to come back if you don't do a good job right now.
Right. Excellent points, Roman. And, when you start to get into lead time and ETAs, I think that in multi-tier orchestration, especially beyond tier 1, things often happen upstream that impact the delivery to the customer on time. So Bjorn, can you unpack a bit around transparency and even provenance? I know that you have a fashion background. Super curious to hear your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, transparency, of course, is a very hot topic in fashion right now, based on events we've seen in the industry the past decade, from factory fires to illegal labor, etc. There's some recent discussion with Uyghur slave labor in China, etc. So transparency is always, or has been, very much on the forefront in fashion the past decade or so. And it's really a complicated issue for the fashion industry, because we've come under intense scrutiny from consumers, not only consumers, also watchdog organizations, et cetera, et cetera. So in the industry, we are more or less really forced to dig into these issues. And as we start to dig into the issues, of course, we're having problems. It's not so hard for us really to move on what I call tier 1, which is who is making the product. Of course, we have plenty of means and methods to certify suppliers and make sure they're compliant with all rules and governance and the regulations of the company. And likewise with fabric and raw materials, we are able to certify different fibers based on the sustainability, etc. There's plenty of organizations, certification methods to our disposal in that level. The problem really is not at level 1, as I call it, tier 1. The problem is really as we go backwards in the supply chain. So now I need to find out, for instance, who made the metal for my zippers in my pants, right? Immediately as I start to move backwards in the supply chain and try to track different components, I run into problem. So the cost of associated with really have full transparency in the fashion industry, I'm not so sure the industry are currently able to absorb those costs. And I'm not sure we really have come up with a good way of tracking all the components in the supply chain. So when we talk about transparency in fashion, it really relates to the basic level on components of the product. And it's very, very difficult to kind of work yourself backwards in the supply chain. So we're still, I think, searching for tools and means on how to do this and how to provide greater transparency in the supply chain. And this doesn't only relate to fashion, it relates to many other industries too. The finer the granulars are of your components, the more difficult it becomes.
Thank you for sharing, Bjorn. And if I can just summarize, it sounds like a critical element of creating that end-to-end, consistent and transparent, connected even customer experience. It requires visibility too, and improved data sharing, whether this is through omni-channel, buy online, pick up on store, which is very popular now, and even in that broad ecosystem orchestration. So let's talk about our next key theme, visibility. We're seeing, as you've described, Bjorn, this paradigm shift from a traditional black box approach to a glass box connected way of working that requires improved data management and an investment in supply chain tech. So I'd like to diverge a bit and bring in Norm from the point of view of logistics provider to retail. And then we'll follow with Jamin. It would be good to hear your point of view from the e-commerce platform end. So Norm, starting with you.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. I think this is a nice tie-in, obviously, to transparency. Transparency doesn't happen unless you have end-to-end visibility. And when you think about where products are coming from, as they hit the ports, where are they going to move from the port to the distribution center or regional distribution center, to a pool point, to a store, to a customer's home? All that visibility is clearly needed in the supply chain. The key to that visibility is what do you do with it? And I think what when you think about supply chain partners is we're able to take that visibility with our toolkits and action the delay that may be in progress. If there's a slowdown at the port, a slowdown at the rail, a weather event causing the trailers not to be able to be moved, some kind of a delay in the supply chain, we're able to then take action and maybe reroute or move that product. And that's really about visibility of the entire supply chain and how it works. Your customers demand it. They demand that visibility. They don't really care about the inside baseball or what's happening inside the supply chain. They want to know that their product has been picked up and it's moved. And what we're trying to do as a third-party provider to support the brands that we have on the phone here today is really how do we help them to manage that visibility across the ecosystem that they have, right? The pick up on buy online and pick up in store, same visibility is required. If it isn't in the store from the RDC, that person shows up and it doesn't pick it up and it creates a bad environment. They're going to go someplace else. So the visibility is clearly something that we're working on. We actually have a tool that we call Ryder Share that gives that visibility all the way through the supply chain into the warehouses and on delivery en route to the end destination. So, and that covers all modes, not just a partial delivery, but also B2B, B2C is covered as well.
Thank you, Norm. David, I want you to share, because I know we talked about this earlier, a little bit around SMBs and how these small and medium businesses now have access to supply chain as a service, so to speak, and years of innovation at their fingertips in a matter of months. Can you unpack that a bit for us?
Sure. And it's great to hear what Norm and team are doing as well, because it's important. It's an important component of what we're building as well. And we're very aligned on this idea of helping small businesses have end-to-end visibility in the supply chain. And so, enabling supply chain services for SMBs, they're in business to buy products so that they can sell products to someone else. All the middle stuff that we do, that we work so hard on, is actually a little bit incidental to them. And so our job, I think, is to make it quiet and non-impactful to them. And so then, of course, that's a lot harder said than done. But they may not have a logistics team that's dedicated, but they have come to expect transparency and reliability in their customer experience. So platforms like Alibaba and others are trying to organize the countless pieces of data that are required to manage the supply chain for these small businesses. And so, using terms like supply chain as a service, I think you get to claim that not just if you've assembled a lot of services together, but it's how you've delivered them to the customer that actually matters. A lot of people pull lots of services together, but it doesn't feel seamless. And I think supply chain as a service has to mean, from the trade to the delivery, it feels like one thing. And we're working hard to do that for our customers. And I think all the work that logistics providers are doing, combined with the trade data that we have, I think enables us to do that.
Thank you, Jamin. And you make a really good point around, this concept of connecting transparency, visibility, and in a really seamless way, And I think that delivering value and how you define value becomes increasingly important. So, Roman, if you can tell us, I know you're passionate about customer value at Etsy. Can you tell us, how do you define value for the customer in e-commerce?
Sure, and you're absolutely right. That is the passion, and value's got a number of components now, and the first, of course, is the obvious. It's cost. I mean, as little as 2 years ago, many organizations were talking about shipping as a revenue opportunity or even break even. Now it's all about the F word. Yes, free. Free is the new normal. It happened fast. It snuck up on a lot of people, and buyers just expect it now. I mean, do buyers honestly believe that it disappeared? No. They just want it simpler. They want the cost included. It makes it easy for them to evaluate the product without having to worry about, well, what's the additional cost? What's additional handling? I mean, math is hard. So, that's, I think, the new normal that we've seen. Next really is speed. How fast can you get it to me? And we call it the click to door speed. Now, the door could be the door to your home, it could be the door to your car, or the door to the store where you're going to pick it up. But we also have to remember that speed has a cost. And that cost is financial. It's also environmental, which is increasingly important. And despite that arms race that we're seeing about who can deliver the product to the buyer, even before they think about ordering it, they need to understand that it's important to offer the right value of speed to mix. Get it to them with options, because not every buyer has the same mission when they're on their computer that moment. Sometimes it's more about the value. Sometimes it's more about a deadline. They need to get it by this date because it's a birthday, it's an anniversary, it's a holiday. And then lastly, that people don't think about a lot is values alignment. And this is becoming increasingly important. As a logistics provider, you're no longer an island. Your values and priorities have to align with your brand and your customers. So it doesn't matter whether you're internal to an organization or you're an outsourced vendor. If you're ordering organic hemp clothing, you can't ship it in styrofoam packing fill. That does not set the right brand message. So brands and buyers really care more and more about all of your actions. And the buyers are making those choices now. They're aligning their dollars and their pocketbooks with those brand choices. And so certainly with Etsy, one of our core values, for example, is sustainability. And so that's why we leaned into 100% carbon offsets for all shipments purchased through our marketplaces, even though we don't touch the box, because that's aligned to our brands and what we believe is what the buyers and what's important to us.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing, Roman. I'm also super passionate about sustainability. And I'd like to diverge a bit, maybe get a little provocative here. And Bjorn, I'm going to ask you a question because I know we've talked about this. This tension of price versus value and sustainability and lowest price. And we know that environmental stewardship matters, but are customers willing to pay for it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, Roman just touched upon something else that customer don't want to pay for, and it's freight. That's another thing we have added in our business as a cost element that eats in on profit margins, of course. So now the question is, if the consumer expects us to be fully sustainable and move, or at least move in a sustainable direction, then we're going to have a lot of course, questions that we have to ask ourselves. And I think although we all feel that sustainability is a moral imperative and is something we have to do in order to help this planet heal itself a little bit. So the question is then, how do we price all these things, from CSR, corporate social responsibility, to waste, to sustainable fibers, to clean manufacturing and all those things? How do we actually price that in? And the question then, of course, the burning question is now, will the consumer be willing to pay for sustainability? And as you know, we have talked about this before. There's plenty of surveys out there that indicates that 60 to 65% of consumers in the choice between a sustainable product and a not sustainable product, they would choose the sustainable product. Although that is met with a great deal of skepticism in the industry, because most of us feel that once you get to the shelf and you can choose between the t-shirt for $25 versus the sustainable t-shirt for $35, most of us believe the consumer will gravitate towards the non-sustainable product. So now we have a situation where, so to say, bad actors will be able to enjoy higher profit margins, while good actors will have to see their profit margin shrinking because price is not really as flexible as we might think for sustainable product. So it puts this whole value proposition we make to the consumer into doubt a little bit. Are we going to be able to become more sustainable, more responsible as a manufacturer, and still be able to sell our product at a higher price? If the question is no, then there's pretty much no incentive in the industry to seek, at least financial incentives for the industry to seek a more sustainable direction. So this is connected with many other things, and the price value ratio that we have in the industry with all the oversupply of fashion, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very hot topic, and it's also something that, in my view, hinders the progression of a more sustainable, environmentally caring industry in fashion. And it's a dilemma right now. We have been talking for this for the last decade or so, and we have not yet made any progress, really. Very, very small progress in our efforts to make fashion industry a more sustainable industry.
Yeah, it's great points, Bjorn. And, when you think about a key lever in sustainable supply chain is how you view risk management and really incorporating some of the social costs of carbon and environmental risk that happen. 50 to 85% of these sustainability impacts happen in the supply chain. Mm. So, when we think about, I don't want to use this buzzword, resilience, which we hear all the time now, how do we become more resilient in our supply chain organizations across network trading partners? I think just looking at the questions, it might be helpful to make resilience real for some of the folks watching and listening. Let's explore a third key theme, the need for resilience in evolving retail models. So as we think about the next 6 to 12 months, can each of you describe what resilience means to you, and that visceral need for agility that you've all described in some way, shape, or form? So real talk, what's front of mind for folks in terms of innovation, keeping up with these evolving retail models and meeting customer expectations? And Norm, if you could kick us off, that would be great.
No, I think that's right. I mean, while you say it's a buzzword, it's reality is that the COVID-19 crisis has created a supply chain challenge for a number of the retailers. So if you were a digitally native provider prior to COVID, you were probably okay. You already had a supply chain set up to handle the online shipping and online ordering. But if you were primarily a brick and mortar company or didn't have a large digital presence and your stores were shut down, how do you get your product to market, right? And so what we're seeing is a shift of a normal, what I'll call retail customer going to the airwaves and saying, I got to get my product to market. Well, what that does is it creates challenges. Their warehouses weren't set up to do that work. Their transportation network wasn't designed to do that. They were shipping full pallets, and now they're shipping eaches. Now they've got to gift pack things. There's a different set of demands. So the resiliency is, how do you then manage your supply chain for those actions that are going to happen you have no control over? We saw a number of customers that got hit with large volumes, and their supply chain wasn't prepared for it. We were shifting vehicles, across the nation to fill needs for toilet paper because we couldn't get enough on the road to fill the need that was happening, and that supply chain was critically impacted. And then at the same time, folks that had products that were not what we'll call critical or essential were pushed to the side by a lot of the shipping companies, right? Just didn't have the ability to move all of it. So your supply chain has to be nimble And that resiliency is something that we have to think about. The buy online, pick up in store presence was what changed the model. Your associates in the stores were not designed to handle that product in that way and to deliver it to someone's vehicle. The product wasn't designed to be moved in that way either. So not only does the supply chain have to move, but your packaging of that material has to be changed so they can handle the new shipping model. So resiliency is having to look at your supply chain in a different way. And that's what we're trying to do with our customers to manage that nuance.
Thank you, Norm. Jamin, anything from you?
Yes. So, there are, I think, one model for building resilience is, let me back up. There are companies out there who have a strategy of just building a lot of assets and a lot of infrastructure. I think for Alibaba, we're going to go the other way for the very reason of resilience here, because I think for us, flexibility is an incredibly important value, and it allows us to, navigate, challenges like the pandemic in a way that is a little bit more resilient for our customers. So we're trying to do that. Customers just don't want to look behind the curtain. They want results. So if your supply chain is not resilient, they will feel things like COVID or a spike in volume. And that means building logistics networks that can flex up during unexpected peaks, flex horizontally, which to me means enabling new modes of service that can supplement overstretched modes during a peak or pandemic. But I think the most important part of this is an actual strong, flexible tech platform that can adapt quickly to changes in the market. Can you quickly move to another provider who's struggling? If not, then your customers will feel it. Can you adapt to new regulations quickly at the border? If not, then you may have to take some of your product down. So I think thinking ahead on those things is important in order to preserve resilience for our customers.
Thank you so much, Jamin. Roman, anything from your side, front of mind?
Sure. I mean, from us, resilience to a large degree is anticipating what the needs are going to be of the buyers. And we've seen a lot of shift in what those priorities are. Certainly, last year it was all about the cost. This year it turned out to be a drag race, see who can get the product to the customer faster. Then it evolved to become a transparency mandate. And you had to be resilient enough to pivot and make sure that those systems were as world-class in keeping up with what everybody else is doing or better. And so now the question is, what's going to be the next one? And, we all need to survive this tsunami that, is coming upon us with this holiday season. So, keeping the standards as high as they have been through unprecedented challenges, I think is obviously going to be the first test of your resilience. But you can't just look at surviving. You need to look at what's happening beyond the tsunami. And beyond that, in January, we have to remember is going to be the returns wave. And how are we going to handle returns when they all start coming in? Are our systems going to be capable of handling that? With the retailers not in place, we're going to start seeing those returns going to different places. And so how can we make it as easy as possible? As easy as it was in retail, just bring it in without all of the crazy things that you have to do about printing labels and finding packing tape and everything else. And also not breaking the bank, honestly. If buyers were not interested in paying for shipping on the way out there, they're going to be less interested in paying for those returns. So how do you manage that in your business model and still keep your product profitable? So I think that's going to be the next test is, surviving this holiday tsunami, but then being ready for the follow-up with the returns.
Amazing insights. Thank you, Roman. Discretionary income, if people aren't able to go out to restaurants and enjoy entertainment outside of their home, they're spending more online, they're spending more in a retail environment. So these are great insights to think about reverse logistics and returns management. Thank you so much for bringing those points up. And Bjorn.
I look at this, of course, from a more manufacturing perspective. Again, the supply chain, as I do manage suppliers on day-to-day basis. So I kind of looked at the question and I asked myself, is resiliency and agility, will it work together? I think if you look at resiliency, I think most fashion manufacturers and brands right now, if they did not have a resilient supply chain, going through COVID-19 is going to be extremely difficult. And agility, as opposed to that, agility to me means that I have a supply chain or a network of manufacturers that I can easily move between in order to mitigate risk, etc. I think resiliency in some aspects is more important than agility. And what I have found is during this COVID-19 crisis, if I didn't have the relationships I have with my suppliers, we would have had a much more difficult time working our way through this crisis. So when it comes to fashion and supply chain, I think the business have for a very long time been very opportunistic in the sense that whoever provides the lowest price at the least risk gets the order. I think we're growing out of that model, and we're moving towards a situation where we really need to make manufacturers partners in what we do from the true sense, true meaning of the word. And if I don't have strong partnerships with my factories, I'm not able to guarantee things in e-com that is extremely important, which is quality. Great quality reduces returns. Right? There's many other things that reduce return, but quality is one of the parameters that determines my return rate. And if I want to consistently deliver product to the customer that is of expected quality at the price they wanted, and through the logistic systems that we have just discussed and the transparency of those systems, if I'm not able to do that, I will not survive in the e-com environment. It's just not possible. E-com works with all the components coming together in a perfect chain together, and it works out to the consumer all the way out to the doorstep or to the hands of the consumer. And so to me, agility is great. Of course, I want agility in my supply chain, and I do have agility in the supply chain, but the resiliency is really more based on the relationships I have with all my manufacturers around the world. That's the only way I'm going to be able to survive in the e-com climate, in the direct-to-consumer business. So partnerships is, I think, what I've seen, because I worked in the legacy model too, the traditional wholesale model for most of my career, and moved to UnTuckIt 5 years ago, was actually my first experience on a direct-to-consumer basis. And I found that it is actually quite different working in direct-to-consumer business than in working in the legacy model. And some of the things that are crucial is really this dependency you have on everyone, every link in the chain to doing the job correctly. If you fail anywhere, it's very few opportunities to make up for those failures and deliver to the customer what you want to deliver.
Right. Amazing points, Bjorn. Thank you so much for sharing. We do have some time for Q&A, and we have quite a few questions to get through. So I'm just going to go in the order that we've received them. The first is to Roman. Roman, how is your team, not the sellers, responding to the increased USPS delivery times to ensure your customers' end-to-end experience isn't damaged?
Yeah, that's obviously, I think, a question that's the entire industry is looking at right now. And, we are being as transparent as possible with our sellers. We're helping guide the estimated delivery times and monitoring it, and then making adjustments. We're obviously working with the USPS and, where possible, increasing the accuracy of the solutions. We can't obviously make the boxes move any faster, but at this point, it is about the accuracy of the transparency, and also we're supporting the USPS as much as possible through our advocacy. Because we believe that a strong postal solution is critical for the micro entrepreneurs, more so than any other organization or group, because they're so dependent on that. They don't have the large contracts, and access to their own fulfillment centers.
Thank you, Roman. Thank you for sharing. Next question is for Jamin. For Alibaba, given the scope of ops, does the supply chain ops leverage the cloud, compute, AI algorithms, or financing resources? And if you could also maybe share a little bit about the role of AI at scale in omnichannel.
Sure. It's a great question, and I probably can't answer all of it, but I'll attempt to do that. So we actually, our company is first a platform, and so we think about how we can build a service for customers in an asset light way. But one of the things we're strong in is things like AI, you mentioned, and AI is something that can be used in a lot of different ways, and we do use it to make our logistics smarter, both in China and just globally. And it can help with things like predictive delivery times, predictive routing, things like that. So that's one area that we use. And then Alibaba Cloud is the third largest cloud provider in the world, and so we definitely have a strength there and able to scale up when there's a volume surge or something like that. But we rely heavily on an ecosystem of excellent non-Alibaba partners, and we're pretty proud of that because there are people that we work with who are better than us in certain areas that we just don't work in. And so we've got payment providers who do an excellent job inside of our platform, helping in the value chain. When people are sourcing, can they get a real-time loan to help them with payments? And then we work with a company called Freightos who helps us with booking ocean freight and air freight. So there's a lot of different partners that we work with, and it enriches the experience for our customers. As long as it's in a seamless way, that's how we do it.
Thank you, Jamin. It's sounding like we're hearing some more themes emerge. Collaboration and connectivity are really also critical when we think about evolving retail models. We have a question for UnTuckIt. Let's see. When dealing with customer returns, what's the biggest cost component of handling them outside of the first mile? Bjorn, if you could answer that question.
Yeah, it's the biggest cost component is really what you do with the return when it comes back. Okay, are you able to refinish the product, or is it something that's going to go into the bin? You always have a cost of shipping out. You have a cost of the actual shipping. You have a cost of course, of returned items coming back to you, and the warehouse charges for putting things back on the shelf. But I would say the greatest component is really the wastage factor in returns, because it's not always that returns come back to you in a condition that allows you to refinish the product and put it back up on the shelf. Many times it goes into a bin instead and becomes a donation somewhere. Right? So the wastage of return, I think, is really one of the major cost components of returns. So.
Perfect. We have time for one last question, I think, Patty. This question comes from Susan. Are you leveraging consumer technologies to give customers greater visibility and transparency? So if anyone wants to share a point of view around blockchain or control tower or any of those new sensing technologies.
Yeah, no, this is Norm. Maybe I'll take a stab at it. I mean, we are using technology, obviously, that has to track that. We're integrating our partners in the supply chain. So as we buy freight across the common carrier market, our own carriers that we have inside of our company, those tools that you have to have are paramount, right? So the integration of our partners, the free flow of information. So the partners that we have in transportation, in warehousing, if we are using a control tower mechanism, they all have to be bought into the reason for it. It isn't just that we want it, but we want it because we're trying to satisfy an end customer need. So the key is really getting all the partners to work together.
Thanks, Norm. Jamin?
Yeah, on the blockchain front, you know, I remember when RFID was struggling to get going, and there's a lot of hype, and then there was some reality as well. I think we're sort of in that journey right now, and I think there is value in the future to the supply chain. I think where the industry will probably start adopting it when there are standards and when the value of using it is proven to be bigger than the trouble of implementing it. And so far, I don't think we've hit that critical threshold yet, but I do think it's got a place in our future.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think blockchain shows promise of being the golden goose here. If we can get it to work and it can be implemented, it's the solution to transparency. However, the implementation seems to me that it's just a massive problem. So, but we have faith in blockchain. It's a little bit overhyped in my view, but we still have faith in it. So we see what the future holds in regards to blockchain, but it could be basically the solution we're looking for transparency.
Amazing. Completely disruptive to ERP. So as a supply chain rebel, I also am a fan of blockchain. So very excited about the promise of that technology. Do we have time for another question, Patty, or?
I think we're actually just out of time, unfortunately, Sheri.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. It was our pleasure to explore and unpack these key themes in the evolving retail model and how to connect with your customer and meet evolving customer expectations. Thank you, Norm, Roman, Bjorn, and Jamin. All the best to everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sheri. Thank you, gentlemen. We're now going to move on to 3 interviews for you to enjoy, followed by a Q&A with these executives. So make sure you're getting your questions in on the Slido just below. Maria Hergish from Reuters Events will firstly speak with Liz O'Neill, the EVP and President of Product Innovation and Supply Chain for Levi Strauss & Co., about the need for agile, efficient, and sustainable supply chain innovation. And that will be followed by a conversation with Sean Curran, the COO of Gap, about leadership principles, talent, and developing flexible operations. And finally, last but by certainly no means least, we will have a discussion between Alexis Dupree, the CSCO of Nordstrom, and John Gould, the VP of Supply Chain and Customs Policies at NRF. And that will be about winning in the new normal, the foundations of a nimble and resilient supply chain, certainly not a topic that is small. With all those things in mind, remember to submit your questions. And Maria, let's head straight over to you.